Hey, still rocking that old high school dropout style. Huh. Today at the reunion, I ran into a classmate who used to mock me back in the day. Even now, as adults, he hasn't changed. He saw me, grabbed his wine glass, and poured it all over me. The rich aroma clung to me, and I felt terrible. Bet you're thrilled to get a taste of the high life, high school dropout, he sneered. He hasn't changed a bit. I was beyond angry and filled with disappointment. That's when I made up my mind. My name is Mark. I grew up in a typical family with a self-employed dad and a stay-at-home mom. My childhood was pretty carefree. After school, I'd toss my backpack and play at the neighborhood park until dusk. But things changed when I hit middle school. My dad stopped coming home regularly because of work. He'd come home after I was in bed and leave before I woke up. On his rare days off, he'd take us to amusement parks or for drives. One late night, I saw my mom sighing over the household budget. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked. She smiled and said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about anything." But I could see she was worn out. Dinner started to have fewer side dishes, and the fruits we used to enjoy disappeared. My lunch became plain rice with a few pickles. One day, Brad, a classmate, noticed my meager lunch and started picking on me. "Your dad ran off, didn't he? That's why you have such lame lunches," he laughed with his friends. I was furious but thought of my mom and held back. Brad was the son of the president of a local company and was seen as a model student by teachers. But he used his dad's status to bully others. My classmates, fearing him, began to avoid me. Brad's bullying escalated until one lunchtime. He approached me while I was eating in a secluded stairwell. Typical peasant's lunch, he sneered and reached for my lunchbox. I knocked his hand away, but he grabbed it and smashed it on the floor. Seeing the scattered food, I thought of my mom's effort. I grabbed Brad by the collar. "Think you can hit me? You know what'll happen," he taunted. I lost control and hit him. A teacher, alerted by the noise, dragged us to the office. "I'm so sorry," my mom said, bowing repeatedly. The teacher believed Brad's story and scolded me, while Brad faced no consequences. Faced with this blatant injustice, all I could do was endure. After the hellish guidance session, as my mother and I were leaving, the teacher spat out at me. "I'm worried about what kind of adult you'll become. Always resorting to violence. Can you even become a decent person? Just you watch." But our life became increasingly difficult. My mom's part-time job was not enough to make ends meet. Despite the violent incident with Brad, my mom believed in me to the end. Always kind, my mom was someone I didn't want to burden any further. So, with the sole desire to ease her burden, I decided not to pursue college and instead chose to work. Decades have since passed. Days whirl by, seasons change rapidly, and society evolves at a dizzying pace, brimming with new conveniences. Before I knew it, the familiar streets had transformed, and my bitter, dark adolescent years seemed to fade into the distance. It was around this time that I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. When I saw that letter, the image of Brad's sneering face came back to me. He would undoubtedly be there. Honestly, I wasn't keen on going, but we were all grown-ups now. Surely, he wouldn't start anything petty. With that thought, I decided to attend. "Hey Kev, long time no see. You look good," being called by my nickname by a classmate. It felt like I was back in middle school. While many had drifted apart after the violence, a few classmates who remained friends through it all were there, and he was one of them. "Man, you've aged a bit, haven't you?" he said, patting his protruding belly. "You too," I replied. As we shared updates and reminisced, a familiar voice rang out. "Hey, you are here too, huh? Wow, Brad, that's you." He seemed quite drunk and was in high spirits. "Brad, you okay?" I was surprised at myself for expressing concern, but Brad, glaring fiercely, retorted, "A bottom feeder like you worrying about me. I haven't fallen that low. Listen up." Holding a wine glass, he boasted, "I run Bradley Merchandising. It's wise to stay on my good side." He laughed arrogantly, then peering into my face, he exclaimed, "Hey, the high school dropout. Still rocking that pathetic style, huh? Well, let me treat you to some fine wine today." With that, Brad held his wine glass over my head and poured the wine all over me. The surrounding crowd went silent, staring at us in a scene of total chaos. The reunion was completely ruined. The rich aroma clung to my entire body, leaving me feeling terrible. How about that? Bet you're thrilled to get a taste of the high-life, high school dropout. He hadn't changed a bit from the times he used his privileged position to cause trouble. I was beyond angry, filled with disappointment, all my secret hopes shattered. "Brad, I've made up my mind," I said. Decided about what? To Brad's mocking face, I delivered a stark announcement. "You're fired." The room fell silent for a moment. Fired? What's that supposed to mean? High school dropout, can't even speak English, Brad asked, clearly baffled. But I said seriously, "It means exactly what it sounds like." The crowd began to murmur. A former classmate tapped my shoulder and asked a question that seemed to float in everyone's mind. "So, what do you do now?" "I currently work at a food company as renowned as Bradley Merchandising." Wiping my head, and faced with a handkerchief I took from my pocket, I started explaining, "I'm in charge of corporate acquisitions, and I'm actually working on acquiring your company. As the next president, you should know this better than anyone." "What? What are you talking about?" Brad, trying to act tough, had his lips twitching and sweat on his forehead. "President Johnson should have officially contacted you about this, right?" "Johnson? President? Wait, the company you work for is—" Brad's face turned completely pale. "Yes, I work for Johnson Merchandising, a company my father is the president of. After high school, I joined this company and now serve as an executive director overseeing the entire company. Deciding not to pursue college and instead work was tough, as there were hardly any companies willing to hire someone with only a high school education. I couldn't afford to be choosy anymore. I applied for any job I could find and ended up working part-time at a logistics warehouse. However, the barrier due to my lack of education was thicker than I imagined. Once people learned about my educational background, their attitudes changed, and I was never considered for permanent employment. Would my life end just as a factory worker? Lost in despair, I was returning home from work one day when I encountered the unexpected. "I'm home." Home, huh? Welcome back. There was my father, who I never thought I'd see again. He looked much older, with white hair mixed in. Despite his weak smile, the sight of him brought a surge of anger, thinking of all the hardships we endured. "You just waltz back now. You have no idea how much we suffered." Then my father tearfully apologized. "I'm sorry, honey. Mark, I'm truly sorry. I was so focused on getting the company on track that I neglected you. No excuse can change the fact that I caused you unnecessary hardship. I'm deeply sorry." My mother and I, without a word, just stared at him. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I want to at least apologize to you both in some way." The house was completely silent. Eventually, my mother spoke up. "Regardless, I'm thankful. You've come back. Things might not go back to how they were, but I do want to try and rebuild our family little by little. But there's a condition." "What is it?" "Give this boy a full-time job at your company." "What?" I turned to my mother in surprise. "Mark has been working hard since he decided not to go to high school. He should be enjoying his youth like others his age, but due to his educational background, he'd have struggled to find a full-time position." My mother's face was serious, almost frighteningly so. How much time had passed? All right, Mark can work at our company, but on one condition. He must take the GED. Understand? There was a sense of earnestness in my father's voice, his concern for my future. Evident, considering I had to give up high school to work. And so, I stepped up from a factory temp to an employee at a renowned company. Of course, it wasn't easy at first. In fact, it was a continuous struggle. Being the president's son made me a target of envy, and I was often harshly criticized for even minor mistakes. Being new to corporate life, I struggled with understanding business etiquette and social norms, sweating through every new challenge. My colleagues would just scoff, offering no help. I felt completely isolated at work. Despite this, I worked tirelessly, volunteering for menial tasks and responding earnestly to unreasonable demands from superiors. Seeing documents I worked hard on being thrown into the trash with a smirk or finding my desk littered with trash, I often thought about quitting. It was disheartening to be judged through the lens of being the president's son despite all my efforts. What kept me going was my mother's presence. The mixed emotions she must have swallowed when she asked for me to be hired at my father's company must have been excruciating. For her sake, I had to meet the company's expectations. As I continued to work relentlessly, gradually people began to recognize my efforts. Slowly, I was accepted as a team member, and this began to reflect in my work results. It possibly provided a healthy stimulus for other employees as the company's sales started to rise. Year by year, as a result of my hard work, I was recognized and promoted. From this year, I became an executive director entrusted with important tasks. I have been involved in negotiations for the acquisition of Bradley Merchandising, a company that had been on a downward spiral for several years. Kev, you've made an incredible rise through the ranks. Never thought we'd have an executive director among our classmates. It's going to be awkward just casually inviting you out now. My unexpected identity caused a stir among the crowd. But Brad, still in disbelief, insisted, "Stop lying. I don't accept such a tall tale." Well, it seems your dad, the president, didn't share much about the company's situation with you. It's not surprising you didn't know, but my father was going to make me president. About that, I said, my expression serious, my father instructed me to overhaul the entire management of Bradley Merchandising, from the president down. That's impossible. Brad's face froze. But I didn't have enough evidence to make such a drastic decision. Then I heard about the reunion and remembered you were supposed to be the next president. I thought it wouldn't be too late to meet and talk here. I let out a breath, releasing the disappointment welling up inside. Brad, you haven't changed at all. Still belittling and blaming others, still full of baseless confidence. That doesn't mean you can fire me. Come on, help me out. We're classmates, right? His attitude had changed drastically from his earlier arrogance, now desperately pleading. But I wasn't going to soften my stance over something like this. I just made a logical decision as a business leader. Running a company isn't as easy as you think, I said firmly and grabbed Brad's shoulders, looking him in the eye. I've faced many injustices as the president's son, but I never gave up because this company was my only path. You had more advantages attending a good high school and graduating from college. It's time you put in real effort for once in your life. Tears held back, my voice shaking, I spoke to Brad, but he just stared back in silence, not uttering a word. A month after the reunion, I stood in front of the Bradley Merchandising building with my father. Today we'll officially proceed with the acquisition. I had confided in my father the day before, and after some reluctance, he agreed to my terms. "We've been waiting for you," said the president of Bradley Merchandising, greeting us as he entered the meeting room, followed by his son Brad. Bradley spoke of his intentions to have Brad succeed him as president. Now about the acquisition. He prompted me to start the discussion, but Brad's behavior was appalling, far from what one would expect from a future president or even a professional. I raised my voice. Hey, Brad, are you even listening? This is about the future of the company. Do you even realize the responsibilities of a president? I don't need to hear that from you, Brad retorted. Then he turned to his father, saying something outrageous. Dad, are you sure it's okay to trust our company to someone who just climbed up using his parents' influence? Brad's suggestion that he was more capable of making beneficial decisions for the company seemed almost delusional. My father, witnessing this, clearly showed a look of exasperation. Even the usually stern face of Bradley grew more severe. Fool, what do you know about our company? He said, his temples throbbing with anger. Brad could only stare back with an expression I had never seen before. Bradley continued, unabated by his anger. Mark's right. Your attitude today is beyond disrespectful. Running a company is not a game. If you're not serious, then leave. Brad's voice was pitifully weak in response to his father's overwhelming presence. The president then stood up, facing us with a serious expression. I apologize for this disgraceful display. I've been too indulgent with my son, expecting him to become more responsible in the workforce, but I was mistaken. I never imagined he would behave so foolishly, especially in such a setting. To you, the executive director of Johnson, merchandising, and you, Mark, I apologize for his many indiscretions. As a parent, I am truly sorry. My father then addressed Bradley. Your feelings are clear, Bradley. The once imposing figure of the food company's president seemed utterly diminished. Bradley, with a desperate look, continued. President Mark, we need your help to save Bradley Merchandising. We no longer have the strength to continue on our own. If we come under your company's wing, I will step down from all my management roles and leave. The same goes for the entire board. But please, keep our employees, our precious staff, without letting anyone go. With that, he bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched the table. I looked at my father, who seemed deep in thought, his eyes closed. Dad, I murmured quietly. He nodded solemnly. Bradley, I began. Yes, I see how much you care about your company. Given that, let's give you another chance to turn things around. A chance. Brad and his father looked shocked. Yes, a chance. If you genuinely care about your employees, there's still something to be done. We'll support you as much as we can. If that fails, we have no choice but to take over completely. Mark, how can I ever thank you? Beside his tearful father, Brad looked completely drained, as if all the strength had left his body. I continued speaking, glancing between the two. I've always resented my father, I began, causing a look of shock in Brad. He neglected our family under the guise of work, forcing me to give up high school. I aimed to prove him wrong. But my mother, who suffered the most, forgave him. I still vividly remember my mother's resolute face when she chose to forgive. At first, I couldn't understand her, but now I get why she decided to forgive. She taught me the importance of it. Mark, I heard my father murmur softly. I am who I am today because my mother forgave my father. And recently, I finally felt like I can forgive him too. Bradley nodded in agreement, feeling as if pushed forward by an invisible force. I continued my thoughts. Everyone deserves a second chance. People become stronger by overcoming adversity, I said, turning to Brad, who was slouched back in his chair. Brad, it starts here. Isn't this your time to step up? But I don't know anything about running a company, Brad replied. I placed my hand on his shoulder. It's okay to start now. Work hard, and the results will follow. Mark. Brad looked at me, a faint smile on his face for the first time. After countless discussions, Bradley Merchandising agreed to a business partnership with Johnson Merchandising and began the path to recovery. Brad became the new president with his father as an advisor. Brad, shedding the pride of being the son of Bradley Merchandising, worked tirelessly to regain the trust of each business partner through humble visits. His transformation inspired the employees. Their mindset began to shift. The company, once complacent under the guise of a large corporation and marred by internal power struggles, saw its employees stand up to the challenge. Sales put more effort into their work, and the administration focused on creating a welcoming environment for business partners. Notably enhanced working conditions by revising inclusive welfare policies and eliminating exclusive systems, contributing to a significant turnaround for the formerly struggling Bradley Merchandising. Encouraged by the changes in everyone, including Brad, the company's sales gradually climbed like ascending stairs. This year, we were even able to provide bonuses to all employees, albeit modest ones. Similarly, our company's performance improved significantly, and we've now reached a point where we can sponsor various advertising campaigns. Mark, President, hurry up. Just a minute. Wait for me, I replied. The reunion became a catalyst for rekindling friendships with classmates. Initially wary of Brad, they were now impressed by his transformation, sharing jokes and laughter. Hey, can we drop the president title when we're off work? I replied with faint annoyance playfully. It's just a habit. Brad said, scratching his head in embarrassment, his demeanor endearingly sincere. Then at least call me by my old nickname when we're not working. I forgot what it was. You used to call me that all the time. Can't believe you remember that, Brad said, fighting exasperation. All right, how about this? From now on, every time you call me president, you owe me a drink. I thought to myself it was indeed a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay, Kev, that's a first, Brad said, stopping in his tracks and calling me by the nostalgic nickname. Thanks, Kev. Human nature tends to cling to negative emotions, and I've been no exception. I resented being looked down upon for being a high school dropout and felt bitter about my social standing. If I hadn't forgiven my father, I might not have reached out to Brad and others. Despite all the harassment from Brad, I couldn't give up on him, remembering my own struggles. People who overcome hardships can face any challenge ahead. If you strongly desire to start over, you can change. From that point, I plan to lead the company humbly, navigating the challenges of business with dedication alongside my valuable friends and colleagues.